Stop trying to be endlessly positive. The modern obsession with good vibes only may actually be sabotaging your creativity, weakening your manifestations, and disconnecting you from your most authentic source of power. The real energy is not hidden inside the parts of yourself you proudly display. It is buried inside the impulses, emotions, fantasies, fears, rage, envy, shame, and darkness you've spent years trying to suppress. What if your shadow is not your enemy? What if it is the source of your creative genius? Carl Jung believed every human being carries a shadow, the rejected and unconscious parts of the psyche hidden beneath the socially acceptable personality. These fragments do not disappear simply because they are ignored. They remain active beneath the surface, influencing thought, emotion, creativity, relationships, and behavior from the unconscious. Most people are taught to split themselves apart psychologically. Certain emotions become good, others become bad. Certain traits are rewarded socially, others are hidden in shame. Over time, the individual creates a socially acceptable mask while burying enormous amounts of psychic energy beneath repression. This creates fragmentation, and fragmented people rarely create powerfully. Modern culture intensifies this problem constantly. Self-help culture often promotes endless optimization, forced positivity, emotional suppression, and performance-based spirituality. People become obsessed with appearing healed, calm, spiritual, productive, and emotionally pure. But beneath the performance, the shadow continues building pressure. The rage still exists. The jealousy still exists. The lust still exists. The ambition still exists. The grief still exists. And the more energy required to suppress these forces, the less energy remains available for creativity, manifestation, and authentic expression. This is why so many people feel creatively blocked. The issue is not lack of talent. The issue is internal censorship. The ego spends enormous energy policing the subconscious mind to maintain a socially acceptable identity. But authentic creativity does not emerge from sterilized perfection. It emerges from emotional depth, texture, contradiction, intensity. Some of the greatest artists, writers, musicians, mystics, and visionaries throughout history carried unusual proximity to their shadow. Not because darkness itself is inherently good, but because they stopped hiding entirely from the deeper forces moving through the psyche. The shadow contains concentrated emotional energy, and emotionally charged energy becomes creative fuel when consciously integrated rather than unconsciously suppressed. This is the alchemy of shame. The traits people hide most deeply often contain their strongest psychic charge. A person ashamed of their ambition may suppress leadership potential. A person ashamed of anger may suppress boundaries and intensity. A person ashamed of desire may suppress magnetism and creativity entirely. The energy itself is not the problem. Unconscious repression is. Jung warned that what remains unconscious eventually controls behavior indirectly. Suppressed emotions do not disappear. They distort themselves through projection, self-sabotage, addiction, anxiety, passive aggression, compulsive behavior, or emotional numbness. But when the shadow becomes conscious, the energy trapped inside repression becomes available again. This creates psychological wholeness, and wholeness creates magnetism. Because authentic magnetism is not perfection, it is integration. People instinctively feel when someone is no longer divided internally. There is a kind of gravity carried by individuals who are no longer performing morality while secretly hiding from themselves. Their energy feels more grounded, more real, more intense. This also changes creativity entirely. Most safe creativity feels lifeless because it has been filtered through excessive social self-monitoring. The artist edits themselves before the subconscious can fully speak. But powerful art often emerges when the ego temporarily stops controlling expression. The subconscious begins communicating directly through symbols, emotion, instinct, tension, contradiction, sexuality, aggression, beauty, fear, and desire simultaneously. The work gains texture because the human being creating it becomes more whole. This is also why dangerous ideas often carry unusual creative power. Not because destruction is desirable, but because authentic expression contains emotional voltage that sanitized expression lacks. The shadow gives creativity edge, weight, humanity. And strangely, this same process affects manifestation as well. Most manifestation fails because the individual remains psychologically divided. One part consciously desires success, while another unconscious part fears visibility, rejection, judgment, responsibility, or change. The person sends conflicting signals constantly. Conscious desire moves forward. Unconscious fear pulls backward. Internal resistance fractures manifestation energy before it fully materializes. But shadow integration reduces this fragmentation. The individual becomes more internally aligned. And the universe appears to respond more strongly to people carrying psychological coherence rather than internal contradiction. A whole person has energetic weight. Their actions become clearer. Their intentions become sharper. Their presence becomes more convincing because less psychic energy is wasted fighting themselves internally. This is why major breakthroughs often occur after periods of deep psychological confrontation. Once enough unconscious resistance dissolves, reality begins moving differently around the individual. Self-sabotage weakens. Fear loses control. Creative output intensifies. Relationships change. Opportunities emerge. Not because the universe suddenly became generous, but because internal fragmentation stopped distorting action constantly. And perhaps this is the deeper secret behind authentic manifestation. The universe responds less to forced positivity and more to integrated consciousness. The shadow does not need blind indulgence. It needs conscious integration. The goal is not becoming consumed by darkness. The goal is becoming whole enough that darkness no longer controls you unconsciously. Because a person fully integrated becomes difficult to manipulate. They stop performing constantly for approval. They stop hiding from themselves. They stop leaking energy through shame. And slowly, they transform from someone seeking validation into someone carrying undeniable creative presence. A force of nature rather than a fragmented personality. Perhaps this is why Jung believed enlightenment does not come from imagining figures of light, but from making the darkness conscious. Because hidden within the shadow may be the very energy required to become fully alive. So how do you actually apply this to your life? The first step is stopping the constant war against yourself. Most people spend enormous energy trying to appear emotionally acceptable, spiritually pure, endlessly positive, calm, agreeable, and controlled. But the more energy used to suppress the shadow, the more fragmented the psyche becomes internally. Shadow integration begins through radical honesty, not public performance, private honesty. Pay attention to the emotions you judge most harshly within yourself. Jealousy, anger, obsession, shame, resentment, desire, control, ambition. Instead of immediately suppressing these emotions, begin observing them consciously without identifying with them completely. Ask yourself, what part of me is being rejected here? What energy is trapped beneath this emotion? What truth is trying to surface? Very often, hidden beneath destructive behavior is distorted life force energy that was never understood properly. Anger may contain boundaries. Jealousy may reveal unlived potential. Obsession may reveal authentic desire. Shame may hide individuality that was rejected socially. The goal is not blind indulgence. It is conscious integration. Another practical step is allowing more authenticity into creative expression. Stop editing every thought into something socially optimized before it leaves your mind. Some of the strongest creative breakthroughs happen when the subconscious is allowed to communicate more directly through symbolism, emotion, contradiction, tension, and honesty. Journal without censoring yourself. Create without immediately polishing everything. Observe recurring fantasies, emotional triggers, dreams, and patterns. The shadow often speaks symbolically before it becomes conscious intellectually. You should also pay attention to areas of recurring self-sabotage. Often the unconscious shadow becomes most visible right before major opportunities, relationships, visibility, or success. This is where hidden fears of judgment, rejection, power, or change begin surfacing. Instead of treating these reactions as proof of weakness, treat them as signals pointing toward fragmentation that wants integration. The more whole you become psychologically, the less energy is wasted fighting yourself internally. And this changes your presence entirely. You become more grounded, more creative, more emotionally stable, more magnetic. Because authentic magnetism comes from coherence. A person no longer split apart internally carries a kind of psychological gravity that other people instinctively feel. This is why shadow integration is not just psychological work. It becomes spiritual work. The hidden parts of the psyche stop operating unconsciously and begin transforming into usable creative force. And perhaps this is the deeper realization. Your darkness was never meant to destroy you. It was meant to become conscious enough to transform into power. If you enjoyed the video, please like, subscribe, and have a wonderful day.